Hi. Lester. Wushu engineer. I love martial arts and training. Or martial arts. Not just my own system. Well, it's distracting. Isn't it? Well, I think let's go back to my desk and we'll carry on the conversation over there. That's better. One of my viewers recently alerted me privately to the fact that one of my videos entitled "Which produces more force, more impact force, fist or weapon?" had recently been uploaded to a small martial arts forum. This was news to me, since I'm generally too busy teaching, training, engineering, and putting food on the table to spend much time on online forums or social media. Getting out the occasional video on YouTube is about all I'm able to do. Thank you for sharing my content. However, my viewer also indicated that many of the comments on my video were far less than friendly. Now, none of the folks who criticized my video on the forum were principled, brave, or decent enough to approach me personally and talk to me directly. Instead, they were quite comfortable to criticize me behind my back and to accuse me of various types of dishonesty. Of course, I'm a big boy, and I do understand that this is the internet, where basic human decency comes to die. I guess haters gonna hate. I'm a bit old school in the concepts that I aspire to. Concepts such as honor, decency, respect, bravery, and honesty. I guess those concepts are all too old-fashioned for some of the more modern martial artists. Well, since they did not have the decency to approach me directly, I'm not going to acknowledge or recognize them in this video response. I'll instead use this as an opportunity to address a point I've been wanting to address for quite some time. One of the critics apparently indicated that they thought that my equipment was misreading my strike because my force values were in the range expected from an elite boxer. Well, this concern is easily addressed. The reason that the force values for my strikes are unusually high is because I train hard. I train at an elite level. I usually train between 30 and 40 hours a week. And I can hit really hard because I train really hard. Simple. My equipment is accurate and is regularly calibrated. In fact, I posted a video of me demonstrating that the calibration was correct using known weights just a few months ago. And if that's not good enough for you, my load cell is currently being used in an official university study and independently calibrated as part of that study. I'm not a showman or some kind of cheat, as was implied and explicitly stated in some of the comments on that forum. But then unprincipled people often accuse others of the very things that they are guilty of themselves, like monkeys in a cage, throwing their own poop at passers-by. Another of the comments that was made about my video was that despite the fact that my strike values were high, my back fist technique was somehow bad. Oh no! My technique is no good. The shame! I've heard that old chestnut before. Have you ever heard of the expression, the proof of the pudding is in the eating? If the values for my impact forces are high, it can be deduced that my technique is good to produce those impact forces. But of course, logic, reason, and rationale do not feature much in some minds, especially when fragile egos are chafed. Let me tell you a story. Early on in my martial arts career, I was invited by a friend of mine to attend a martial arts workshop that he was hosting with an international traveling instructor. I was not particularly interested in attending, but my friend begged me and another friend of mine to attend because he didn't have the necessary numbers for his workshop. So we both agreed to attend on the condition that he did not reveal that we were members of another martial arts school. We would be attending incognito to avoid any kind of friction or egotism. We were just going to attend quietly and perhaps learn a thing or two. At the time, I had only been training for a couple of years in my current system, and the friend who attended with me was a year or so my junior in the same system. My teacher is a very experienced and competent fighter who rose out of a hard, old-school approach to Kung Fu training. He has trained many high-level competing martial artists as well as military and law enforcement personnel. Our training typically involves a lot of hands-on freestyle sparring and technique practice against significant resistance, as well as a very pragmatic, combat-effective approach and associated applications. South Africa is not a place that is conducive to martial fantasies when it comes to self-defense application. So my friend and I were reasonably competent fighters, even though we may not have been particularly experienced in our system. When we arrived, the friend who had invited us whispered something to the traveling instructor, and he announced, "Ah, so these are the Kung Fu students," and I sighed inside. We fell in line with the other attending students during the warm-up, and we were doing fine until the head instructor decided to walk up to me and challenge me by attempting a takedown. Note that we were not practicing this as a technique. We were just doing warm-ups and introductions. He just walked up and attacked me. It was completely out of the blue and purely an attempt to demoralize me in front of his students, despite the fact that he was supposed to be significantly more experienced than me, with a couple of decades of experience, and was something like a 4th, 5th or 6th Dan practitioner. I can't remember now. Well, I felt right from the beginning that I was going to go down. His takedown was good. So instead of resisting, I complied and focused my effort instead on twisting in his grip on the way down. I ended up landing on top of him in a straddle position with my elbow just over his throat. If I had wanted to, and the situation was a real one, I could have allowed my body weight to drive my elbow into his throat before I started the ground and pound. I could see in his face that he was taken aback by what had happened and was flustered for a few moments before he opened his mouth and said, "But your technique is bad." Can you see the irony? Was he correct about my technique? Was my technique bad? I'm fairly certain that at the time, his technique was better than mine. But did it matter in that instance? No, because my fighting instinct was better. If the situation had been real, he would have had a very, very bad day, despite my bad technique. We see this kind of behavior a lot in the martial arts world today. I know many martial artists personally who are afraid of being accused of having bad technique. They tend to keep their heads down in the current climate because that kind of criticism and negative attention can have a negative impact on their reputation and can hit them financially if they're trying to run a martial arts-based business. I think it's time that these kinds of baseless criticisms get challenged and outed for what they really are. Cheap shots. That's why I decided to focus the martial arts side of my YouTube channel on practical investigations into the resultant effects of applying certain techniques rather than on silly endless discussions about whether a technique is good or bad. I use scientific methods and properly calibrated scientific equipment such as load cells and laboratory timers to investigate martial arts performance. I will thus, as the Wushu engineer, put my money where my mouth is when I make a claim about something. I'll either prove my hypothesis scientifically using some kind of measurement, or I will find that my hypothesis is false, and instead I will go and look to test something else. This is part of the scientific method. These kinds of investigations are incredibly interesting to me, as I hope they are to you too. So this is a message to the critics. You can claim bad technique all you want, but talk is cheap. If all you can do is talk about it on an online forum, your words are without substance. Until you can prove it using some form of repeatable, verifiable test, it's just an opinion. And you know what they say about opinions. I'll see you next time. Cheers.